Chapter 41-48. Yiqing Luo pursed her pale lips and was about to reply. Second elder saw Yiqing Luo's weak side and laughed heartily. Yiqing Luo, this elder advises you to be obedient. It's your fortune that the Hall Master has taken a liking to you. Don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. The third judicial judge looked at the expression of the Linglong Palace Lord. Seeing her cold expression, he did not stop the second judicial judge from showing off here. He already had a plan in his mind. It looked like Linglong Palace Lord really wanted Yiqing Qing to be the next successor to the Palace Lord. It wasn't just the second judicial officer who couldn't understand. Even she really couldn't understand why they had chosen Yiqing Luo. If the Linglong Palace was handed over to Yiqing Luo, can this Linglong Palace Hall really survive? However, no matter how many questions he had in his heart, she couldn't bring herself to ask the Hall Master either. No matter what the reason behind it was impossible. As long as this was the Linglong Palace Master's goal. That was the goal of all of them. At least for now. He still had to obey the Palace Lord of Linglong Palace. In just a short moment, the tripartite judicator's thoughts had already turned 1,000 times. His eyes moved slightly. She smiled and put on an expression of a peacemaker. Miss Yi, although the second judicial judge's words are not pleasant to hear, she is not wrong. The Hall Master has taken a liking to you and wants to groom you to be the next Hall Master. This means that he appreciates your abilities and you as a person. If you become the next Palace Master, the entire Linglong Palace will be yours. I'm sure you're aware of the Linglong Palace's position in Jianghu. If you become the Linglong Palace Lord, it will absolutely be 100 benefits and no harm to you. The third judicial judge's words invisibly stirred up the second judicial judge's nerves. Originally towards the fact that Linglong Palace Lord had taken a liking to Yiqing Luo to become the next Palace Lord, he was already filled with puzzlement and displeasure. Now, he was stimulated by the words the entire Linglong Hall is yours. Although the second preceptor was a little angry, but he was not a fool either. She targeted Yiqing Luo in such a manner. If Yiqing Luo really became the Linglong Palace Lord, she was definitely the first one to be punished as a warning to others. Second judicial officer's eyes flashed past a vicious glint as he looked at Yiqing Luo with jealousy and hatred. She clenched her fists tightly and cupped her hands towards the Linglong Palace Master. Lord Palace Master, this subordinate feels that she does not have the qualifications to become the Linglong Palace Master. Not waiting for Linglong Palace Lord to reply, she continued, the reason why Yiqing Luo came to Linglong Palace is because she killed Shadowless City's mysterious maiden Mu Qiulan. On top of that, without embroiling city's goddess Qiao Yulu had died at the hands of the Palace of Gloomy Darkness because of her. Now, in less than a day since she arrived at the Linglong Palace, she has already torn the Linglong Palace apart. He provoked enemies everywhere and indirectly caused the death of our new female disciple who just entered the Linglong Palace. At this point, the tone of the second judicial officer became obviously indignant. Lord Palace Master, she carries the blood feud of too many Linglong Palace disciples. The Palace Lord of Linglong Palace slowly shifted her cold and gloomy gaze onto her because of the second Lord's words. The coldness that shot out from his eyes. It was like frost, causing one to tremble with fear. The second preceptor felt a chill down his spine when he saw that gaze and shivered. Chapter 41-49. If it wasn't for the Overlord, she's nothing. I can't accept a waste becoming the Palace Lord of Linglong Palace. After second judicial officer said this, she didn't forget to flatter Linglong Palace Lord, the only Palace Lord that I can accept is only you alone. But Linglong Palace Lord apparently wasn't moved by second judicial officer's flattery. On the contrary, a vicious glint flashed past her eyes. It was fleeting. Second judicial officer didn't notice it at all. She continued to speak with righteous indignation, I still have the same words. A life for a life, it's only right and proper. Even if the overlord was here, Yiqing Luo would have to take responsibility for the few lives she had taken. Following that, second judicial officer raised her chin up high, putting on a look of righteousness, as though she was wholeheartedly thinking for Linglong Palace. Third judicial officer immediately went up and pulled second judicial officer back, persuading, Palace Lord naturally has her reasons for making this decision, we just have to do as she says. You're not feeling well now, so don't stay here. If we were to fight, it'd be bad if you're injured. She called out to the female attendants, as she lifted second judicial officer's carriage. On the other side, she looked at the surroundings, at those guards who had just rushed over and weren't affected by the palace lord's sinister chi, as she shouted in a low voice, still not going over, take the opportunity to restrain Yiqing Luo. After she shouted this, she pretended to exhort, if she cooperates, don't harm her life. Third judicial officer's words were comprehensive, but it was like a needle, piercing into second judicial officer's heart. This was telling her, because Linglong Palace Lord was their palace lord, so no matter who the palace lord wanted to appoint as the next palace lord, they could only listen. Their opinions were all useless. Her body wasn't feeling well. Wasn't it because Linglong Palace Lord took the initiative to injure her? Obviously, Palace Lord didn't trust Yiqing Luo, but in order to put on a show in front of her, she injured her. Wasn't she innocent? Autocratic, overbearing and inhumane Palace Lord. A seed was planted in second judicial officer's heart, as it sprouted. And on the other side, under the orders of the three judiciaries, the female guards looked at the pale-faced girl who was so weak that she needed the support of the palace master of the Netherworld Palace. Then, he looked at the palace master of Dark Palace with fear. Corpses were strewn all over the ground. It was a cruel and bloody scene. They all knew that it was the evil art of the black-robed man. They were also worried that they would be affected by that man, and that they would kill each other with their sisters. What are you waiting for? Do you want me to do it myself? Chapter 4150. A man dressed in a purple robe descended from the sky. His figure was tall and slender, beautiful and upright. His arms stretched out. In his arms, there was an additional slender red figure. Immediately after, the man emptied one of his hands. His slender fingers were beautiful as he gently waved his sleeves. His sleeves rolled like flowing clouds. A misty profound glow rippled in all directions, under everyone's naked eyes. When the profound glow rippled, the speed was obviously extremely slow. But, it was just a moment's time. Everyone only felt a burst of domineering and oppressive aura instantly exploded. In an instant, all the surrounding female guards who had swarmed over, along with the corpses on the ground, were swept away. The sky was filled with flying stones and blood splashed everywhere. The strong aura didn't stop because of this. Everyone only felt a dull pain in their chest. Their internal organs started to rupture and explode. Bam! Linglong Palace Lord's body, which was standing in the midst of flying sand, was suddenly flipped over as she crashed heavily onto a huge rock which had collapsed not too far away. Her body and mind were in immense pain, which made Linglong Palace Lord's eyes widen. What kind of energy was this? It actually broke through her barrier. Linglong Palace Lord couldn't imagine how she witnessed her own barrier shattering bit by bit in front of her eyes. Ever since she became Linglong Palace Lord, she had never suffered this kind of humiliation. Overlord. It's Overlord. A few exclamations were like thunder as it fell into Linglong Palace Lord's ears. No. Impossible. How could it be Dmo Xian? She had obviously set up an inescapable net near Linglong Palace Lord. Set up numerous arrays. Even if it was Dmo Xian, he would absolutely not be able to barge into Linglong Palace Lord. Linglong Palace Lord forcefully propped up her body as she staggered to stand up and look towards the direction where the energy came from. Profound waves rippled as the energy pervaded. Yiqing Luo was in the arms of a purple-robed man. That peerless face revealed a kind of soul-stirring charm which no one dared to profane. As he lowered his eyes to carefully size up the young lady in his arms, that pair of shimmering peach blossom eyes blossomed with endless coldness and treachery. A strong aura lingered around him. The moment the Linglong Palace Master's line of sight shifted over, the Palace Master of the Linglong Palace Hall looked over. The man suddenly raised his head and a pair of icy cold eyes shot straight at the Linglong Palace Master. Like a sharp blade, it ruthlessly pierced into the heart of the Linglong Palace Master. The Linglong Palace Lord's pupils suddenly shrank and he looked away in fear. Following that, his body became extremely stiff. It's him, it really was Dmo Xian. The face of the Linglong Palace Master twisted a little, she knew it very well. Dmo Xian's appearance would disrupt all her plans. Although he had never crossed hands with Dmo Xian. However, he just stared at her. The Palace Master of the Linglong Palace knew. This rumored mysterious and powerful overlord, he definitely lived up to his reputation. When everyone saw Dmo Xian's appearance, his heart was filled with fear. He felt that death was shrouding his body and mind. However, there was one person who was overjoyed. Ah Xian. The girl's clear and sweet voice was filled with joy. She wrapped her arms around the man's neck and smiled sweetly. The young lady's voice made the man's chilly aura restrain a little. He lowered his head slightly and his shimmering eyes were tainted with a thin layer of evilness. His eyes were as black as a lake, so deep that one couldn't see the bottom. Yiqing Luo knew that he was angry because of the injury on her body. Chapter 41-51. Over and over again, she softly called out his name. The man finally sighed helplessly. His eyes were filled with pampering. He raised his hand and his palm covered her head. It's no use acting coquettishly. You didn't protect yourself properly, so you deserve to be punished. Yiqing Luo grabbed his hand and placed her palms by her lips. She then raised her head and blinked innocently at him. It's my fault, I admit my mistake, I accept my punishment. Verbally, although she admitted her mistake and accepted her punishment. But that expression and that tone. Dmo Xian totally didn't hear the meaning of admitting his mistake. But, when he met with the young lady's eyes, seeing that she was injured, the irrepressible irritation in his heart gradually subsided. He lifted her chin and his index finger lightly touched her lips as his voice was extremely cold. On the account that you're clean and honest, I'll forgive you. Clean and honest. Yiqing Luo blinked as she had a dazed look. Very quickly she reacted and turned her head to look at the Palace Lord of Secluded Palace. Dmo Xian couldn't be talking about him, right? The Palace Lord of Secluded Palace who was called out had originally seen Yiqing Luo's flowery smile towards Dmo Xian and his heart was stabbed. Suddenly he heard Dmo Xian's ridiculing and boasting words. His throat couldn't help but had a fishy sweet feeling. He was so angry that he wanted to throw up blood. His heart was filled with bitterness and helplessness. Towards him, Yiqing Luo always had a cold and distant attitude. Even if he touched her, she would avoid it. But the moment he saw Dmo Xian, he saw with his own eyes that the young lady's face bloomed with joy from the bottom of her heart. The way she looked at Dmo Xian and her body movements. It revealed her love and trust towards Dmo Xian. The more he looked, the more he felt that this scene was extremely glaring. But he had no right to pull the both of them apart. He also didn't have the right to be like Dmo Xian, snatching Yiqing Luo from his hands without any explanation. When the gazes of the two men shifted onto him, he was stunned. He subconsciously turned his head away, unwilling to look at the loving couple. Yiqing Luo didn't think so much, and after she heard Dmo Xian's words, she raised her fist and pounded on Dmo Xian's chest. When did you arrive at Linglong Palace? Did they arrive a long time ago? What happened just now? Did you see it clearly? She was referring to the scene where the palace master of the Linglong Palace led his disciples to besiege her. Dmo Xian shook his head and nodded. Then, he held her little hand with his broad hand. If I had entered the Linglong Palace, you wouldn't have been injured. There was a tinge of guilt in his voice. His slender fingers lightly touched the netherworld phoenix ring on her fingertip. The connection between the netherworld phoenix ring and the netherworld dragon ring can transmit everything you've experienced to me. Yiqing Luo's eyes widened as she couldn't help but secretly rejoice that she was an upright person and was extremely clean. Dmo Xian saw through Yiqing Luo's inner thoughts with one look. He rubbed her head affectionately. When he raised his eyes again, the gentleness and pampering on his face had already faded away. His gaze looked towards the Linglong Palace master, who was standing not too far away, attempting to escape. The corners of his lips curled upwards into a bloodthirsty cold arc. Bam! He didn't move. But in the air, it was like a sudden clap of thunder as it exploded. The Linglong Palace master had yet to react. Her body was violently blasted away. He could only hear the rumbling of a violent explosion. Following that, her body fell heavily onto the ground once again. Chapter 4152. Mouthfuls of blood spurted out from Linglong Palace Lord's mouth. The ground also started to shake violently. Inch by inch, it started to crack. The palace lord of the Linglong Palace seemed to be fleeing in a panic. He dragged his wretched and low-laughing body as he swayed and rolled on the ground to avoid the crack that had opened up under his body. She used all her strength to prop herself up and climbed up. Every move she made her limbs and bones emitted intense pain. What kind of power was this? She obviously hadn't seen Dmo Xian make a move. Linglong Palace Lord's miserable state fell into the eyes of the Linglong Palace Lord's disciples and made them tremble in fear. In their eyes, Linglong Palace Lord was the most powerful person in the world. But the moment the Overlord appeared, he easily suppressed Linglong Palace Lord to the point that she couldn't turn the tables. If the Overlord made a move on them, would they be able to survive? Fear and dread eroded the hearts of the Linglong Palace Lord's disciples. She's just deliberately mystifying things. Second Judicial Judge's face turned pale. That profound wave earlier made his mouth overflow with blood. But his mouth refused to admit defeat. Her eyes stared deadly at Dmo Xian, and then stared deadly at Yiqing Luo, as her eyes were filled with venom. Overlord. Do you know that the woman whom you've been pining for, pampering, is behind your back, keeping that gigolo by her side? As she said that, she laughed maniacally. This kind of fickle woman, and you're still so protective of her. These 2 days, the both of them are carrying you, sticking together at all times. Even at night, the both of them are in the same room. Do you know why she got hurt? She got hurt because of that pretty boy. Second Judicial Judge's sudden burst of maniacal laughter and the words he said made the surroundings turn silent. Third Judicial Judge was stunned. He immediately stretched out his hand to pull Second Judicial Judge, attempting to stop Second Judicial Judge from self-destructing. But Second Judicial Judge shook off Third Judicial Judge's hand, his eyes filled with ridicule. Overlord, are you really going to destroy the entire Linglong Palace for such a vixen? I feel indignant for you. Oh. Really? The man's gorgeous cold voice rang leisurely. His voice was flat, without the slightest hint of emotion. He got Di Zun's response. The second judicial officer felt that his words had completely stabbed a man's dignity. After all, Di Zun was such a high and mighty man. How could he accept such a fickle slut? Even if there was nothing between Yiqing Luo and the palace lord of secluded Darkness Palace, However, once this rumor was spread out, it would be a disaster. So what if she was innocent? With just a few words, he could still confuse her. How could a woman with a tarnished reputation be worthy of the divine supremacy? Second judge became even more enthusiastic. That's right, Overlord, in my opinion, a slut like Yiqing Luo should be killed, in order to maintain Overlord's prestige. She paused for a moment and suddenly flashed a slightly wretched smile. Overlord, the disciples chosen by the Linglong Palace are all good-looking and have extraordinary backgrounds. If Overlord takes a fancy to any of them, you can take them all away. At least, they will serve you more loyally than that bitch. The second judicial officer's words could be said to be extremely bold. The three judiciaries standing on the side were so frightened that they withdrew their hands. The Linglong Palace Lord also looked at the second judicial officer in astonishment. Chapter 4153. Towards the second judicial officer's actions. No one tried to stop him, with the second judicial officer diverting the Overlord's line of fire. Why not? What's more, if the second judicial officer's words could really agitate the Overlord to deal with Yiqing Luo, and among them, who could catch the Overlord's eye? That would be like a sparrow turning into a phoenix, soaring to the skies. Naturally, no one dared to say a word. As for the second judicial officers, fickle woman, vixen, slut, and so on, she only raised her eyebrows with a faint smile, without any other emotions. Her lips curled up slightly. Her long and narrow eyes rose slightly, outlining an extremely shallow cold arc. This was the second judicial officer's motive. To push the female disciple of the Linglong Palace into Dmo Xian's arms. Did she feel? Dmo Xian was so thirsty that he couldn't be choosy. Wasn't the second judicial officer's thinking a little too simple? What are you laughing at? The second judicial officer's gaze stared fiercely at Yiqing Luo. Seeing Yiqing Luo's faint smile, filled with ridicule and pity, the anger in his heart surged up. Yiqing Luo raised her eyebrows, as her long and narrow eyes curved even more. She crossed her arms and slowly walked away from Dmo Xian's arms. Under the infusion of Dmo Xian's profound energy, the internal injury which was caused by the Linglong Palace Lord was slowly recovering. That beautiful face that could topple cities also regained its color. When she raised her eyebrows and smiled, the red flame made her even more flirtatious and gorgeous. The second judicial officer was mesmerized by this smile. She's indeed a vixen. The second judicial officer's face flushed red, as he angrily tried to conceal his wavering heart because of Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo laughed softly, as her eyes squinted, quietly looking at the second judicial officer. Obviously, the distance between the two of them was considered far, and it was parallel to the ground. But the second judicial officer felt that Yiqing Luo had a condescending feeling, looking down on her. This kind of feeling made the second judicial officer feel extremely aggrieved. Facing the second judicial officer's increasingly sinister gaze, Yiqing Luo was still smiling. Her eyes flashed, occasionally with a sharp glint. "I'm laughing at you, the second judge." The girl's clear and melodious voice was filled with ridicule. Her smile seemed to be mocking him. Without waiting for the second judicial judge to speak, the girl raised her eyebrows again. "Are you sure you won't take back what you said just now?" The second judge snorted disdainfully. "Take it back. When has the second judicial division ever retracted its words?" Yiqing Luo clicked her tongue as she had a helpless look and looked at her pitifully. "I forgot to tell you, my Xian is extremely protective of his children." Chapter 4154. As the man's voice fell on the last word, bam, a deafening explosion was heard. The crowd only saw. The palanquin of the second judicial magistrate was suddenly torn into pieces. A terrifying and valiant aura instantly exploded. This scene was extremely horrifying. The crowd watched with their own eyes. The second preceptor, who was sitting on the palanquin, was torn into pieces by that terrifying power. As though he had self-exploded. His entire body exploded. Blood and flesh splattered all over. This scene shocked everyone present as they trembled in fear, even their breathing became cautious. Second judicial officer. Second judicial officer was blown up just like that. Only small pieces of minced meat were left from the explosion. Furthermore, they didn't even see when Dmo Xian made his move. Too terrifying. The rumored overlord was simply too terrifying. Even the Linglong Palace Lord couldn't do anything to the overlord. Linglong Palace was finished. This time, Linglong Palace was really finished. Whereas at this moment, that ravishing young lady stood under the minced flesh, her expression didn't change as she shook her head helplessly. I've said it before, my Xian is protective, but he didn't listen. Look, he lost his life in vain. Everyone was so infuriated by Yi Qing Luo's shameless words that their faces contorted. This man's show-off was really complacent. What's so great about relying on a man? All right. Relying on an amazing man was really amazing. At least, it was impossible for them to rely on the overlord in this lifetime. Yi Qing Luo didn't bother about what those Linglong Palace Lord's female disciples were thinking. Her line of sight turned and landed on the Linglong Palace Lord. Looking at the disheveled-looking Linglong Palace Lord who was staring at them vigilantly, Yi Qing Luo's pink lips curled upwards as she walked towards the Linglong Palace Lord, step by step. Her footsteps were very light and slow. Step by step, neither too fast nor too slow. There was no sound at all. But as the young lady lifted her footsteps, the hearts of the Linglong Palace Lord's female disciples were pounding furiously. This suffocating atmosphere. The Linglong Palace Master's heart tightened. She glared at the young girl who was walking towards her, her eyes filled with malice. What do you want to do? What do I want to do? Yi Qing Luo tilted her head as she laughed softly. All along, isn't it what you want to do? The face of the palace master of the Linglong Palace was slightly pale. She raised her head slightly and said, I underestimated the strength of a venerable sovereign. I am not as skilled as you. You can kill me or torture me if you want. His tone was very arrogant. Kill you? Yi Qing Luo shook her finger. Killing you, isn't it freeing you? I'm not that kind. When the Linglong Palace Master heard this, her serious face suddenly changed and her brows wrinkled. What do you mean? Doesn't Lord Hall Master know very well what I mean? Yi Qing Luo had already walked in front of her, merely 3 steps away. If I didn't guess wrongly, to become the Palace Master of Linglong Palace, what you have to sacrifice is your own freedom. She tilted her head again, as though she was in deep thoughts as she smiled. So, how could I let you die? Following her words, every single word was spilled out. The expression on the Linglong Palace Master's face kept changing. Yi Qing Luo couldn't help but laughed as her narrow eyes curved. Chapter 4155. Yi Qing Luo's eyes were slightly suffused with a faint chill. When her long and narrow eyes were raised, the corner of her eyes outlined a blossoming flame. That smile was breathtakingly beautiful. But in the eyes of the Linglong Palace Master, he looked like an Asura who had crawled out of hell. Every single smile and frown revealed a chill that caused one's entire body to go cold. The Linglong Palace Lord had never encountered such a pressing pressure before. Even earlier, when he met Dmo Xian's icy sharp black eyes, he did not have such a feeling. Fear unconsciously seeped out of her eyes. When he spoke, even his voice trembled slightly. You. What do you want to do? Yi Qing Luo's eyes narrowed as she looked at her disdainfully. What do you think I want to do? The Linglong Palace Master pursed her lips and a cold light flashed in her eyes. She did not answer. He clenched his fists tightly. He felt humiliated. Yiqing Luo intentionally paused for a moment, admiring the Ling Long Palace Lord's icy cold face, revealing such an embarrassed expression. She said nothing. Invisibly, it created even more pressure on the palace master of the Ling Long Palace. The pupils of the Ling Long Palace's hall master rapidly contracted. It was as if a hurricane was about to burst out of her eyes. Yiqing Luo then parted her lips slightly and said word by word, "What is the purpose of Ling Long Palace's existence? You, and the so-called mysterious fairy, why do you exist?" Because her body was suitable, she was forced to become the next palace master of the Ling Long Palace. It sounded extremely ridiculous. In the Ling Long Palace, he needed to find a compatible body. There must be some sort of motive or reason behind this. Hearing Yiqing Luo's question, Ling Long Palace Lord's expression froze for a moment. "I don't know what you're talking about. Since you want to die so badly, you might as well tell me about it. If I'm happy, I can fulfill your wish, right?" Yiqing Luo opened her mouth with a smile as her slender fingers gently caressed her lips. He looked as if he was really helping the Ling Long Palace master out of kindness. The muscles on the face of the Ling Long Palace Lord trembled slightly. What did he mean by letting her get what she wanted? If they could, who would want to die? If he really wanted to die, how could he have endured in the Ling Long Palace for so many years? Even though he was the Ling Long Palace Lord, he did not have any freedom and he could not seek death. However, if a person really wanted to die, there were thousands of ways to do so. Moreover, the Ling Long Palace Lord would want her to inherit the position of the next Ling Long Palace Lord in exchange for her freedom. This meant that she did not want to die at all. For a person who longed for freedom, but did not dare to, and was unwilling to die, the only way was to follow her psychological line of defense and infiltrate bit by bit. Chapter 4156. The Ling Long Palace Master did not respond. With a sunken face, he exchanged glances with Yiqing Luo. The storm in his eyes seemed like it was about to explode. "Don't want to say it." Yiqing Luo raised her eyebrows and dragged out the last syllable, "Huh? Miss Yi." At that moment, the voice of the great judge was heard. Everyone's attention was drawn to her. The great judge took a careful look at Dmo Xian before opening his mouth to speak. "Miss Yi, isn't the purpose of Ling Long Palace's existence to maintain the balance of the Earth realm? If Miss Yi is unwilling to become the Ling Long Palace Master, we won't force you." "No!" A furious roar suddenly rang out. Ling Long Palace Lord's eyes were burning as he stared at Yiqing Luo. It must be her. Why? The great judicial magistrate pursed his lips tightly. He really couldn't understand why the hall master insisted on making Yiqing Qing the next hall master. Especially in front of his majesty, this was no different from courting death. What was the palace master persevering for? It wasn't just the Grand Inquisitor's doubts. This was also the doubt in the hearts of many disciples of the Ling Long Palace. "Yi, Lady Yi," the Grand Judicial Magistrate's face turned pale as he looked at Yiqing Luo, racking his brains to think of a way to help the Ling Long Palace Lord escape. This was not because she valued the Ling Long Palace Lord. Instead, the moment something happens to the Ling Long Palace Master, everyone they interact with will be blamed. The Overlord would definitely be furious for the sake of the beauty. Yiqing Luo didn't even cast a glance at the Grand Magistrate. The smile on his lips had yet to dissipate. On the contrary, it added a treacherous arc. However, amidst the treachery, her smile became extremely sweet. "What if it has to be me? It seems that Lord Palace Master does not intend to have a proper discussion with me." The storm gathering in the eyes of the Ling Long Palace Lord had already turned extremely dark. It was as if he had been forced into a corner. His 5 fingers tightened. His figure was swift as he broke through the raging waves around him. Bringing along the piercingly cold profound wave, he approached Yi Qing Luo in an aggressive manner. This action of the Linglong Palace Master was filled with the determination to die. She did not give herself any leeway at all. It was beyond everyone's expectations. After all, Di Zun was just there. Fighting in front of Di Zun. Was he tired of living? But it happened. The palace lord of the Linglong Palace did exactly that. Not only that, she had succeeded. In front of the overlord, he had successfully pushed his palm towards Yi Qing Luo. That palm strike was completely different from the Linglong Palace Master's strength. Instead, it was a kind of terrifying power that was close to destroying the heavens and extinguishing the earth. Yi Qing Luo's eyes sunk. He blinked his eyes in a certain direction. He quickly flipped over. Perhaps the blink of an eye had delayed him for a moment. Her figure seemed to have been sent flying by the majestic aura. The slender figure spun a few rounds in the air. Under everyone's gaze. Two figures flew up at the same time, following the direction of the young girl. His purple robe fluttered in the wind, and his style was peerless. His black robe fluttered in the wind, and his evil aura was awe-inspiring. But, the two of them moved at the same time, but they were not as fast as the Linglong Palace Master. Just as the two of them flew up at the same time, the young girl's body fell into the hands of the Linglong Palace's Palace Master. The surroundings were filled with piercingly cold glints. The murderous aura charged towards the entire space. Yi Qing Luo's shoulder was tightly gripped by 5 icy cold fingers. Chapter 4157. Linglong Palace Lord didn't stop at all. She didn't even bother to look at Dmo Xian and the Palace Lord who had already rushed over. Violent energy vibrated in the air. Profound ripples surged, blocking the path of the two. When she raised her eyes again, Linglong Palace Lord and the young lady's figures had completely disappeared from everyone's eyes. Yi Qing Luo. Palace Lord's pupils constricted as he turned his head and stared at Dmo Xian, an overlord. You can't even protect your own woman. Dmo Xian's gaze didn't even look at him as his deep as ink eyes stared unblinkingly at the direction where Linglong Palace Lord and Yi Qing Luo had disappeared. There was no response. The anxious Palace Lord's eyes were covered with a layer of cold intent. Dmo Xian. He had just finished his shout. A purple afterimage flashed past her eyes. Dmo Xian's figure had already disappeared. Beside her ear, there was a man's icy cold voice which was blown by the wind into Palace Lord's ears. You also know that she is this Lord's woman. The Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace froze on the spot. Yi Qing Luo only felt a wave of light surging in front of her. The howling cold wind was like a bone scraping, fiercely blowing against her face. Everything in front of her was covered by a patch of black. She could only faintly see that surging silvery light not far ahead. As she got nearer to the direction of the surging, that hand on her shoulder was clasping harder and harder. Linglong Palace Lord seemed as though she wanted to crush her bones completely. The distance between the two of them was separated by a robe. Yi Qing Luo could clearly feel the nervousness from Linglong Palace Lord, as well as the fear that arose from the bottom of her heart. Yes, fear. Yi Qing Luo's lips unconsciously lifted. But moments later, Linglong Palace Lord had already brought her to their destination. What entered her eyes was a patch of empty beautiful pitch black. The most eye-catching thing was that in that pitch black, there was an obvious shape of a huge black hole. That black hole was in the shape of a vortex. As though it was in the darkness, a huge bloody mouth was opened. It was as if it wanted to devour everything in the world. He just stared at the huge black hole. Yi Qing Luo felt a strong sense of discomfort. It was as if some sort of heavy energy was constantly seeping out of the black hole, suppressing the surrounding space. No, I don't know if it's an illusion. He had a feeling that this black hole, was about to burst out and suppress everything in the world. Yiqing Luo's mind had just flashed past this thought. All of a sudden, the palace master of the Linglong Palace gave her a forceful push and retreated to the front of the gigantic black hole. Yiqing Luo staggered a little and finally stabilized her footsteps. However, the Linglong Palace's palace master closed in on her again and pushed her into the black hole. As she neared the black hole, Yiqing Luo felt a chill down her spine. Something cold pressed against her face. That touch, sticky and cold. It was so cold that it made one's hair stand on end. It was even more horrifying than having a poisonous snake crawling on his face. Yiqing Luo's brows twitched. He subconsciously wanted to reach out and grab the thing on his face. But in the next instant, that cold and sticky thing stuck to her hands again. Both her hands were tightly confined, totally unable to move. That disgusting feeling made Yiqing Luo's goosebumps all over. Chapter 4158. Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes, trying to adapt to the scene in front of her. But, no matter how she looked around, the surroundings were still in darkness. She felt as if she was trapped in a boundless black fog. She couldn't see her fingers in front of her. Even the night vision eyes that he usually used were useless. At this moment, it had no effect at all. What on earth was going on? Just as she was pondering over it, her four limbs had been entangled with a sticky cold thing. It completely confined her, making her unable to move. Suddenly, Linglong Palace Lord's trembling voice was heard, "My lord, this is the next successor of Linglong Palace Lord whom you have set your eyes on." Linglong Palace Lord's tone was filled with fear and cautiousness. "My lord." Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes. So, the thing in this black hole was the person whom Linglong Palace Lord was loyal to. Could it be this sticky cold thing that was entangled on her body? Was it created by that, my lord? Yiqing Luo's emotions were in a whirl. But on her face, there was no change in her emotions. She was just about to find out what was hidden in this pitch-black surroundings. Suddenly, an ice-cold feeling, as if it was glued to her body, caused her to have goosebumps, and a voice that made her hair stand on end, rang in her ears. "Well done." It was just 4 words. But it made Yiqing Luo's heart lifted. This voice. It seemed to be beside her ears. But if she listened carefully. But it seemed to be in a faraway direction. The tremors continued to reverberate in his ears. Not only was she unable to differentiate the other party's location. Even the sound was unable to differentiate the direction. Danger. Outside the black hole, Linglong Palace Lord's voice rang once again, "My lord, I have already found someone to replace me. My lord had once promised me." Speaking to this point, Linglong Palace Lord's voice quivered, as though she was trembling, as though she was in fear. But, after the quivering, as though it was for her own future, she mustered up her courage and continued, "My lord had once promised me to return me my freedom." Slave. The person behind Linglong Palace Lord actually called himself a slave. To the person hiding in the black hole, Linglong Palace, was it just a slave farm of TA? "Of course, I won't go back on my word." That cold and sticky voice sounded emotionlessly. This made the Linglong Palace master kneel on the ground in excitement. "My lord is wise." As soon as the Linglong Palace Lord's voice fell, suddenly, a blood-curdling scream was heard. Immediately following that, Yiqing Luo's eyes suddenly lit up with silver light. The light was faint. But under this boundless darkness, there was no end in sight. Chapter 4159. That sticky icy cold voice laughed sinisterly, "Since when did this god lie to you? You want freedom. Death, isn't that the biggest freedom?" No. No. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Linglong Palace Lord's eyes widened in terror, trying to struggle. But how could she break free from the densely packed bloody bones that were imprisoning her all over her body? The more she struggled, the more the blood bones embedded into her body, as though her entire being was sucked into her blood bones. Linglong Palace Lord's expression, in the midst of her struggle, gradually became extremely twisted and horrifying. She even bared her fangs and brandished her claws towards Yiqing Luo, hoping that Yiqing Luo could save her. In front of this god, you still dare to call yourself I? Have you forgotten the rules which this god had set for you? The icy cold voice was mixed with anger. You deserve to be punished. These two words had just ended. Yiqing Luo heard Linglong Palace Lord's heart-wrenching scream. Following that, a faint silvery light enveloped her. Yiqing Luo saw. Linglong Palace Lord's body was slowly absorbed by the blood bones. Until the very end, that face which was filled with fear, pain, malevolence, distorted. Various expressions, was also sucked into the blood bones. Yiqing Luo totally didn't see clearly. How did that blood bone suck such a huge person like Linglong Palace Lord into a blood bone which was only as thick as an arm? She only knew. Linglong Palace Lord slowly became smaller in front of her eyes, and finally turned into nothingness. But Linglong Palace Lord's agonizing screams continued to ring beside her ears. The instance when Linglong Palace Lord disappeared. The silver light in the surroundings also suddenly dissipated. In front of her eyes, it turned into a patch of pitch darkness where she couldn't even see her own fingers in front of her. The densely packed blood bones which spread across the entire space also disappeared into the darkness. But that scene had already been firmly engraved in Yiqing Luo's mind. Following the descent of darkness, Yiqing Luo's heart thumped hard. The scene of Linglong Palace Lord being swallowed earlier kept replaying in her mind. Now, the thing which stuck onto her body, the thing which confined her, was that blood bone which saw earlier. That blood bone was something which sucked human flesh and blood. So, she was now imprisoned by the blood bone. In other words, he would become food for Shuegu. No, that's not right. This thought flashed past Yiqing Luo's mind. But it was instantly denied. If he was not wrong, the reason for the existence of the Linglong Palace should be because of the Lord that the Linglong Palace master mentioned. The blood bone was sharp, as if it wanted to fuse with her flesh. A lowly slave like you dares to question this god's words. The cold and sticky voice suddenly became cold and treacherous. Yiqing Luo was in so much pain that her entire body felt like it was being dismembered and her forehead was oozing with cold sweat. Why can't I doubt you? If what you said is true, how could you have such a big reaction? The feeling of something being drained from his body also disappeared in an instant. Yiqing Luo's complexion was slightly pale and her pupils were extremely sharp. Little girl, you want to resist me? The sticky voice was mixed with a hoarse sneer, like a sharp saw that was rubbing against each other. If it weren't for the worry of breaking your new slave, this god would really like to see how far you can resist. His tone was filled with excitement and madness. Yiqing Luo's fingers clenched tightly. The profound phoenix ring on his fingertip left a deep mark on his skin. Suddenly, the profound phoenix ring heated up. Yiqing Luo's eyes lit up and the expression on her face also became gentle. Slave, obediently inherit the Linglong Palace and become the lord of the Linglong Palace. As for the follow-up mission, this god will issue it to you. The gloomy voice didn't seem to sense the change in Yiqing Luo's emotions. What replaced it was a thick and warm chest. The man's clear and melodious voice, like the babbling of flowing water, faintly sounded, Body. Who? Who is it? That cold voice roared. All around, one could hear the rustling sound of the densely packed bloody bones scurrying about. Although Yiqing Luo couldn't see who it was. However, the elegant scent of sandalwood made her feel at ease. He instantly recognized the man who had rushed over. Yiqing Luo's lips curled into a smile. From feeling the aura from the profound phoenix ring, Yiqing Luo knew that her Xian had arrived. Yes. Chapter 4163. At that moment, Yiqing Luo specially took a look at Dmo Xian. It was to pass on her own plan. Only when she was brought away by the Linglong Palace Lord would she be able to find out the real motive of the Linglong Palace Lord and from there lead out the mastermind. As long as she knew who the mastermind was, everything would be much easier to settle. As long as there were no accidents. The profound phoenix ring and profound dragon ring's connection could totally allow Dmo Xian to follow the aura to find her. Just one gaze had explained so many things. Luckily, she and Dmo Xian had a tacit understanding. Dmo Xian hugged the young lady's slender body tightly as his chilly peach blossom eyes swept across the boundless darkness. His gaze turned colder by several degrees. With a wave of his sleeves, a strong wind blew out. Profound energy pervaded every corner of the surroundings. Yiqing Luo suddenly felt her eyes lighting up. She immediately raised her little head from Dmo Xian's embrace. She saw the man's floating profound energy spreading out, and wherever it went, it blew away pieces of pitch black like ink. Just like sunlight, chasing away all the darkness. The surrounding scenery became clearer bit by bit. The space under the illumination was not like the faint glow which was emitted when the blood bones swallowed the Linglong Palace Lord. Yiqing Luo could see the horrifying scene around her even more clearly. The blood bones, which were dripping with blood, were like a spider web, spreading across the entire space. Other than the position where Dmo Xian was hugging her, the surrounding 2 steps radius, the rest of the space, were all covered. And what made Yiqing Luo most shocked was, in the middle of the sky full of blood bones, hung a head. A man's head. His age was around 40 or so with handsome features. She could tell that he was a handsome man when he was young. That head's eyes stared straight at their direction. Who are you? How dare you trespass into this god's territory? That head's mouth opened and closed. That voice was exactly the same as the icy cold and sticky feeling which Yiqing Luo heard earlier. It's him. This head was the owner of the blood bones. The mastermind behind Linglong Palace. Why would he have such an image? As though sensing Yiqing Luo's gaze, that head looked towards her with a sinister look. Young lady, it's you. These are the reinforcements you've brought. His tone was full of ridicule. Naive. I am a supreme god of the divine world. How dare you, a bunch of ants, try to contend against me? The head's voice fell. The blood bones from all directions quickly gathered towards the 2 of them. But before he could get within 2 steps of the 2 of them, the densely packed bloody bones seemed to be blocked by something, and all of them piled up in the air. One bloody bone after another, one after another. Chapter 4164. You, who exactly are you? The expression on the head's face was twisted to the point where it couldn't be any more twisted. It was hideous and terrifying. There was a hint of disbelief in his cold eyes. The man in front of him was dressed in a purple robe like flowing clouds, unparalleled and peerless. That pair of inky black eyes were pitch black. His gaze was calm, without any extra emotions. But just one look and a feeling of fear and awe rose from the bottom of his heart. Awe. When had he ever had such a feeling? He was the high and mighty god of the god realm, how could he be in awe of anyone? But he was very clear. This man, just a casual lift of his hand and he was able to completely break his indestructible blood bones. His strength was absolutely not weak. Who was this man? Blood-bone barbaric king. The man opened his thin lips slightly and spat out these 4 words, which made the expression on the head completely stiffen. The head's shocked and incredulous expression had been replaced by a gloomy ruthlessness. His eyes were covered with a layer of frost. The ice-sealed sharp gaze seemed to turn into a sharp blade and cut the opponent's heart. Who are you? Why do you know this god's name? His sticky voice was even colder. Dmo Xian replied indifferently, I once heard that the blood-bone barbaric king privately used the divine body as nourishment to extend his life and enhance his own strength. This caused chaos in the god realm. The emperor of the god emperor sent an army to suppress it, but they became nourishment for the blood-bone barbaric king and were completely annihilated. Following Dmo Xian's words, that head's expression became more and more gloomy. In the end, his entire head hung low. His long hair hung loosely at the side of his body, concealing his emotions. But it could be seen. Because of Dmo Xian's words, he recalled the past that had long been buried in the deepest part of his heart, unwilling to dig out. But suddenly, Dmo Xian took another turn. After the army was annihilated, the emperor of the god emperor personally went into battle and annihilated you. Annihilated? That meant he didn't even have the chance to reincarnate. Yiqing Luo was puzzled. If the blood-bone barbaric king was really annihilated, how could he possibly appear in the earth realm? Could it be that the divine emperor did not really kill the blood-bone barbarian king? And after the divine emperor passed away, the blood-bone barbarian king quietly escaped. No, this isn't right. How could the divine emperor make such a mistake if he personally took action? The divine emperor would have personally confirmed that the blood-bone barbarian king had been annihilated. Under the eyes of the divine emperor, the blood-bone barbarian king had no choice but to secretly do something like this. Ha! I didn't expect that after tens of thousands of years, someone would still remember me. That head. No, it should be called the barbaric blood-bone king now. He laughed sinisterly, his face filled with ridicule. You are someone from the god realm. No. Dmo Xian glanced at him indifferently. Barbaric blood-bone king, you built the Ling Long Palace in the earth realm and controlled the entire earth realm. Your motive is to reappear in the world, right? Ha ha ha. The barbaric blood-bone king laughed loudly, but in his laughter, there was a chilling intent: reappear in the world. This god's biggest motive is. This god wants to attack back into the god realm and let that bastard have a taste of all the pain this god had suffered. Attack back into the god realm. Chapter 4165. Was the barbaric blood king sure that he was not joking? God realm. That was the god realm. Was it something that could be attacked as one wished? Could it be that he had stayed in the dark for too long and his brain had rusted? You want to seek revenge from the sovereign of god emperors? Dmo Xian could hear the hatred in the barbaric blood king's words. The barbaric blood king sneered as his blood bones started to make a cracking sound. Yes. This god wants to trample that bastard under my feet. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes slightly. The barbaric blood king's reaction was obviously too intense. This kind of hatred was not only because he had been defeated by the sovereign of god emperors. It looked like the former sovereign of god emperors and the barbaric blood king must have had a past. Before Yiqing Luo could imagine a big piece of melodramatic story in her mind, the man's low and indifferent voice came into her ears. Perhaps your expectations are going to be disappointed. The barbaric blood king's expression suddenly sunk. What do you mean? The sovereign of god emperors had already passed away not long after you turned into ashes. Dmo Xian said. As soon as these words left his mouth, the expression on the face of the head embedded in the bloody bones seemed to freeze. After a few breaths of time, he suddenly looked at Dmo Xian. His eyes were filled with anxiety and disbelief. How could she? How could she? The long hair on the head was also swaying because of the agitation. The densely packed skeletons in the surroundings continuously let out intense cracking sounds. You are lying to this god. She is the sovereign of god emperors and has the ability to live forever. How could she have passed away? Dmo Xian's expression was still indifferent. No one knows what happened 10,000 years ago, but the sovereign of god emperors has passed away. It is indeed a fact. The barbaric blood king's eyes froze bit by bit and finally fixed on an expression. His mood looked a little dejected, with an indescribable feeling. The entire space fell into silence once again. The barbaric blood king did not say a word for a long time. Yiqing Luo was secretly thinking of a big wave of melodramatic plot. Suddenly, she was knocked by Dmo Xian. Yiqing Luo felt the pain and raised her head to glare at the man. However, she was met with the man's dark and serious gaze. Don't let your imagination run wild. The Emperor of the Divine Emperor has nothing to do with the barbaric Bloodbone King. Yiqing Luo's grumbling words were swallowed by the man's seriousness. She puffed up her cheeks, not understanding why Dmo Xian had suddenly turned so serious. Could it be because of the Divine Emperor? It could be seen that Dmo Xian had deep feelings for the Emperor of God Emperors. Kind of like respect. It was kind of like reverence. His feelings were complicated and Yiqing Luo couldn't understand it. Chapter 4166. The barbaric Bloodbone King roared as its bones collided more violently. That momentum was as though it had lost its rationality. That frenzied look made Yiqing Luo shocked. What's wrong with him? Yiqing Luo looked at Dmo Xian. Although the barbaric Bloodbone King was crazy. But Yiqing Luo wasn't worried that the barbaric Bloodbone King would break through Dmo Xian's protective shield. Dmo Xian's eyes glanced at her indifferently as his large palm stroked her hair comfortingly, anxious to verify the fact that the Emperor of God has passed away. Yiqing Luo blinked her eyes. Don't feel that. His persistence towards the Emperor of God is a little abnormal. Dmo Xian's hand on her head pressed her hard. Don't let your imagination run wild. No matter what feelings he has towards the Emperor of God, it has nothing to do with the Emperor of God. Yiqing Luo raised her hand and grabbed his large palm. Her long and narrow eyes stared at his eyes with a smile yet not a smile. What are you looking at? Dmo Xian looked down. Yiqing Luo grabbed his hand tightly as a suspicious expression appeared on her face. You seem to have a kind of complicated feelings towards the sovereign of God Emperor as compared to the barbaric Blood King. Speaking of this, she squinted her eyes again. When you and the barbaric Bloodbone King were talking, it sounded like you were like someone who knew the Emperor of God thousands of years ago. The slender fingers on the hand she held in her palms suddenly moved. Yiqing Luo looked at his hand and raised her brows. Don't tell me you are really an old monster who has lived for thousands of years. She thought that she had lived for 2 lifetimes and being together with Dmo Xian was already considered as a sibling love. But now it seemed Dmo Xian had lived for many times longer than her in both lifetimes. 10,000 years old monster. Yiqing Luo was shocked by this thought of hers. Her words, coupled with the messy expression on her face. Dmo Xian's face turned black. His large palm directly pressed on Yiqing Luo's head. What kind of messy things are you thinking about in this brain of yours? This is a very serious deduction. Yiqing Luo said seriously, I am seriously suspecting that you are thinking of gnawing on this little tender flower of mine. Dmo Xian's fingers suddenly changed direction. His slender, jade-like fingers held her chin. That peerless countenance suddenly came close to Yiqing Luo. In the blink of an eye, the man's face, which was completely defenseless against her, enlarged. The fragrance of sandalwood filled the air. Yiqing Luo's vision couldn't help but tremble. Her eyes stared unblinkingly at the man's approaching face. Then, his deep and magnetic voice floated into her ears, "Don't tell me. I'm a person who has lived for tens of thousands of years, and you're planning to abandon me." It was obviously the kind of pitiful and aggrieved words. But coming from the man's mouth, there was an inexplicable evil aura. It was very alluring. Yiqing Luo couldn't hold it in any longer. Not abandoning, not abandoning. Even if you're a 10,000-year-old monster, I still love you. Dmo Xian narrowed his eyes. Huh. A 10,000-year-old monster. That end was deep and magnetic. Yiqing Luo's little heart melted for a moment. Look at that face, that voice. Which part of him looked like a person who had lived for 10,000 years? Cough, I don't mean that. What I mean is, even if you're really a person from 10,000 years ago, I won't despise you. Yiqing Luo's survival instinct was very strong as she immediately changed her words. Dmo Xian's thin lips only twitched. Chapter 4167. Yiqing Luo. She probably couldn't coax him well. Who knew that men were also very concerned about their own age? The two of them acted as though there was no one else around, openly displaying their affection. It even agitated the barbaric blood-bone king. The sinister eyes on that head were bloodshot red. It showed the barbaric blood-bone king's raging emotions. Lad, do you really think this god can't do anything to you? The barbaric blood-bone king's sinister voice was like a sharp blade. His voice had just ended. Like a spiderweb, the bloody bones that intersected with each other suddenly surged. It was no longer like before, using the blood bones to charge around. But, one by one, the blood bones quickly gathered around the both of them. Tightly, those drops of blood on the blood bones started to drip down drop by drop. The thick blood dripped onto the transparent protective shield that Dmo Xian had conjured. In an instant, the surrounding shape was revealed. The transparent protective shield was dripping with large amounts of blood. The most important thing was that blood was like lava. After it floated on the protective shield, it would make a sizzling sound as it melted. But after a moment, the surroundings of the both of them were covered by a patch of red. Their ears were filled with that kind of melting sound. Yiqing Luo frowned slightly. Her eyes were blood red. Is he planning to melt your barrier directly? Dmo Xian hugged her slender body tightly. I'm not too sure about the effects of the barbaric blood-bone king's blood bones. You follow closely. The word "I" had yet to leave her mouth. Suddenly, a piercingly cold wind struck. Yiqing Luo instantly felt a strong majestic pressure, pressing down from the top of her head. Her nose was filled with a thick smell of blood. And something dripped onto her body. The clothes that came into contact with it, with a sizzle sound, a big hole was melted. The protective shield was really melted by the blood. Yiqing Luo reacted swiftly, raised her hand to pull the sleeve which was dripping with blood, and tore it off. To prevent the blood, through the robe, from dripping onto her body. The protective shield was melted. Be careful. Dmo Xian speedily hugged Yiqing Luo tightly and stuffed her little body into his embrace. Yiqing Luo could hear it clearly. It was the sound of Shui Gu's blood dissolving Dmo Xian's robe. This blood, it could even dissolve Dmo Xian's enchantment. Not to mention human flesh and blood. Dmo Xian blocked it for her. What about himself? I'm fine, don't worry about me, think of a way to leave this place first. Yiqing Luo stuck her head out from his arms, her eyes filled with worry. He raised his head. She saw that the man's luxurious purple robe had already been melted by the blood, revealing a large area of his fair skin. Because he had been circling her tightly, she was unable to escape. The blood flowed along the melted robe and dripped onto his skin. In an instant, it melted and turned pitch black. Yiqing Luo could even feel the body of the man who was hugging her trembled slightly. Ah, Xian! Yiqing Luo's eyes turned red as she cried out urgently. His voice was choked with emotion. I can protect myself. I'm fine. The man's voice didn't have much fluctuation. His large palm pressed on her head and pushed her back into the room. Don't look. Ah, Xian! Yiqing Luo pursed her lips, her hands clutching his robe tightly. She wanted to struggle, but was afraid that her struggle would affect Dmo Xian. This silly man. Wouldn't she be worried if she didn't look? Chapter 4168. He didn't want her to get hurt. Did she want him to get hurt? Dmo Xian carried the person in his arms as he swiftly shifted his position. However, the barbarian blood-bone king had clearly anticipated this. Before the blood on the bones could dissolve everything, it had already used the blood on the bones to build solid walls of blood. It blocked Dmo Xian from all directions. Dmo Xian's sleeves fluttered. The majestic profound energy kept vibrating. But there were just too many bones around. Even if it smashed the large piece of bones in front of him. Soon after, a new wall of blood appeared. Especially after the blood bones were broken. The blood that splashed out from the broken bone also scattered in all directions like a goddess scattering flowers. In such a situation, there was no way to break out of this space. Yiqing Luo had been pressed in the man's arms. Her face was plastered on his chest and her head couldn't move. Beside her ear was the man's steady and calm heartbeat. And the sound of blood dripping onto Dmo Xian's body. Yiqing Luo's hand which was clutching his robe tightened. Ah, Xian! When you get hurt, my heart will ache too. Her voice was choked with sobs. Under this situation, Dmo Xian had been protecting her and was being melted by the blood. As time went on, this kind of melting would melt the entire person. Just at this moment, Dmo Xian's hand suddenly pressed on her body. Following that, she heard a heavy breathing. Yiqing Luo's heart trembled violently. She quickly glanced sideways. She saw the man's purple robe which was like flowing clouds had been completely melted. On his arm, there was a scar. Yiqing Luo stretched out her hand and grabbed his arm. Before she could open her mouth, her body suddenly felt a cold and sticky touch. Her body was suddenly lifted up by a force out of thin air. Following that, her four limbs were confined and unable to move. That sticky, like a poisonous snake, eroded her entire body. All of this. It happened too quickly. The barbaric blood king apparently saw through the feelings between them. He was deliberately using such a method to force the two of them to be distracted. Little Luo, Dmo Xian's eyes turned cold as he totally didn't care about the burnt mess on his body, as his figure speedily approached Yiqing Luo's direction. A large amount of blood dripped down. Dmo Xian completely ignored it. His eyes were fixed on the young girl who was being restrained by the barbaric bloodbone king. Although Yiqing Luo's four limbs couldn't move, but her mind and consciousness were still clear. Looking at the man's desperate appearance, she struggled even harder. At this moment, her eyes were already dyed with a seductive red. On his wrist, the azure dew bracelet that resembled a cherry blossom totem was also faintly flickering with a faint flowing light. Ah, Xian! Between his lips and teeth, he spat out a silent name. The expression on her face was also changing bit by bit. As for the blood-bone barbaric king who had already lost his rationality, he totally did not notice the change in Yiqing Luo. Seeing that Yiqing Luo had been restrained, he manipulated the blood bone to block Dmo Xian's path. Immediately after, it rushed towards Yiqing Luo impatiently. This body of yours, this god wants it. As soon as he finished speaking, Yiqing Luo felt that her body seemed to be squeezed into something. A strong and majestic sense of oppression. It made her body produce an intense rejection. But that gush of energy was still surging into her body. It was like wanting to occupy her everything, to swallow her everything. What on earth was the barbaric blood king trying to do? Her body. Chapter 4169. Yiqing Luo's pupils constricted. Could it be? Bloodbone barbaric king wanted to take over her body. Dream on. Yiqing Luo's eyes turned cold. Her entire body shook. An inexplicable aura poured out. She only felt. Her own consciousness kept resisting against the energy that wanted to squeeze in. That inexplicable aura quickly wrapped around that power. Following that, Yiqing Luo's mind went blank. Her consciousness was lost for a moment. A miserable shriek was heard. A blood-colored figure was sent flying. Yiqing Luo felt her 4 limbs were loosened. She lost all support and fell from midair. A hand clasped her waist. He pulled her into his embrace. Yiqing Luo opened her eyes tiredly as she leaned into the man's arms, panting slightly. What's going on? She totally didn't know what was going on. At that moment, her mind went blank and she lost consciousness. Then she regained consciousness. Her body was so weak that there was no energy at all. She couldn't even gather her profound energy. You actually. Not waiting for Yiqing Luo to reply, that cold sharp voice rang from the side. Yiqing Luo turned her head in Dmo Xian's arms, seeing that disheveled skull embedded in the blood bones. But what shocked Yiqing Luo the most was, in all directions, the densely packed bones that were intertwining with each other began to break apart one by one. With a speed visible to the naked eye, they started to break. What was going on? Why did blood-bone barbaric king suddenly become like this? Why is she in your body? It's actually you, it's you. Bloodbone barbaric king seemed to have seen something on Yiqing Luo as his eyes widened and his mouth kept screaming something. His shock and disbelief. Yiqing Luo totally couldn't understand. She wanted to ask. Above her head, the man's deep and indifferent voice floated down. She is not someone you can spy on. Bloodbone barbaric king shook his head. Impossible. Impossible. This god won't believe it. You are all lying to this god. This god absolutely won't believe it. He muttered softly. His expression was one of madness. Amidst the murmurs and roars, Yiqing Luo felt a resistance pushing Dmo Xian. Another blink of an eye. The densely packed and broken bones in front of him had already disappeared. In front of them, it was already bright. This was the Linglong Palace. The barbaric blood-bone king expelled them from his space. Yiqing Luo frowned slightly as she had many questions in her heart. However, he could not muster up any strength to sense the aura of the barbaric blood-bone king. Her body was so exhausted that she didn't have the chance to think. Well, take a break, I will be by your side. The man's gentle voice, close to the ear. In a trance, his thin lips planted a kiss between her eyebrows. It was very light, very faint, but it had a reassuring warmth. In the next moment, Yiqing Luo couldn't resist the exhaustion in her body and fell into a deep sleep. He could vaguely hear someone talking beside his ear. Her power is about to awaken. It's about time. By the time Yiqing Luo opened her eyes again, she was already lying on the soft big bed. What greeted her eyes was a piece of white gauze. Her long curly lashes fluttered as she woke up a little. Chapter 4170. This was an extremely luxurious and elegant room. The air was filled with the faint scent of sandalwood. It can make people calm down. This familiar and reassuring scent should have been prepared by Dmo Xian. He looked around. There was no one else in the house. She slowly got up. His limbs were weak. His body seemed to have been hollowed out by something. He couldn't muster up any strength in his body. She furrowed her brows. He just woke up after a nap. Why does my body feel so tired? Could it be from before? The Linglong Palace Lord wanted to forcibly take over her body, and this was the repercussions. Didn't the Linglong Palace Master fail? Girl, you're finally awake. Old Man Sang's figure slowly floated out from the azure dew bracelet. He floated to the side of Yiqing Luo's bed, his eyes filled with worry. How is it? Do you feel any discomfort anywhere? Yiqing Luo shook her head. I just can't muster up the strength. I'm fine, I'll be fine after a few days of rest. Old Man Sang heaved a sigh of relief. Yiqing Luo looked at Old Man Sang's expression and frowned even tighter. What's wrong? I'm fine. Old Man Sang chuckled. Your current situation can be considered normal. When the Bloodbone Barbarian King tried to forcefully invade your body, it was repelled by the profound jade heart within your body as well as the power of the divine tool. Your body and soul have been affected during this process, which is why you are feeling so uncomfortable now. He explained in a relaxed tone. But Yiqing Luo somehow felt that Old Man Sang's words seemed to be hiding something. Yiqing Luo pursed her lips but didn't probe further. She only nodded and asked, Where's Xian? Linglong Palace Lord is dead, and the disciples of Linglong Palace all thought that Linglong Palace Lord was killed by the Overlord. Old Man Sang saw Yiqing Luo changing the topic and immediately replied. Then, he sighed. After all, the Linglong Palace has a very good reputation in the land. Furthermore, it is the representative and symbol of the land. The death of the palace master of the Linglong Palace will affect the entire land. Yiqing Luo lowered her head. She knew this very well. Everyone was ambitious. The Earth domain was divided into 3 main cities. Each main city wanted to unify the entire Earth domain and establish itself as the king. The existence of the Linglong Palace just happened to maintain the balance of the 3 main cities. Now that the Linglong Palace had collapsed, those ambitious people in the land domain would definitely become restless. It would not be easy to resolve the matter regarding the Linglong Palace. Even if Dmo Xian stepped forward, he might not be able to suppress those ambitious people. Right now, the Bloodbone Barbaric King has no intention of rebuilding the Linglong Palace. I reckon that he won't appear in the Earth domain for a while. Even if he does appear, he won't be interested in the Linglong Palace. Old Man Sang saw the worry on Yiqing Luo's face and comforted her. The Overlord naturally has his own considerations, you don't have to worry. Mentioning the Bloodbone Barbarian King, Yiqing Luo recalled the frenzied look of the Bloodbone Barbarian King when he heard that the God Emperor had passed away. She seemed to have thought of something as she suddenly raised her head and looked at Old Man Sang. How can you be so sure that the barbaric Bloodbone King has no interest in the Linglong Palace? Listening to Old Man Sang's words, it seemed that Old Man Sang also knew the Bloodbone Barbarian King. Old Man Sang was startled. Only then did he realize that he had let it slip. Just as he was about to change the topic, he saw Yiqing Luo staring at him intently. Chapter 4171. Yiqing Luo nodded. Bloodbone Barbaric King built the Linglong Palace to seek revenge on the Divine Emperor. She paused and asked again. He wanted to make use of the Linglong Palace to gather some power in the Earth realm. Yes, just like the previous King of Darkness. Old Man Sang had no intention to hide. Initially, everyone thought that the Bloodbone Barbaric King was annihilated by the Divine Emperor, but in actual fact, The divine emperor only dispersed the blood-bone barbaric king's soul and sent him to the earth realm to sleep in eternal peace. Yiqing Luo replied, "Isn't the blood-bone barbaric king cursed in the god realm? The existence that everyone hated. Why did the divine emperor spare his life? And intentionally created the illusion that the blood-bone barbaric king had been annihilated. One must know that the blood-bone barbaric king used his body as nourishment, absorbing the flesh and blood of the god realm's people to maintain his life and increase his power. After doing these things, the divine emperor actually spared his life." She linked it to the blood-bone barbaric king's attitude towards the divine emperor. The melodramatic plot in Yiqing Luo's mind started to ripple once again. "I don't know about this." Old man Tsang interrupted Yiqing Luo's wild imagination. He built the Linglong Palace in the earth realm, probably to use the same method to find a suitable body to absorb the other party's soul and energy. Like the Linglong Palace's profound maiden, Linglong Palace's disciples, their imposing manner were all nourishment for the blood-bone barbaric king. Especially the Linglong Palace's lord. Not only to find a suitable body and power for the blood-bone barbaric king, and to find someone with a better body than himself, to become the blood-bone barbaric king's nourishment. Wasn't his soul dispersed by the divine emperor and he slept in eternal peace? Why is he still awake? Yiqing Luo asked. Old man Tsang's expression was grave. The Linglong Palace was a force that suddenly rose hundreds of years ago and quickly took root in the earth realm, becoming the symbol of the earth realm. In other words, the blood-bone barbaric king had awakened hundreds of years ago. As for why, this point needed to be verified. I feel this matter will not end so soon. Yiqing Luo's eyelids drooped down slightly as she thought of the blood-bone barbaric king's looks. She had an ominous premonition. Don't let your imagination run wild. Old man Tsang retracted his solemn expression and revealed a smile. After knowing that the divine emperor has passed away, all of the barbaric blood-bone king's perseverance will disappear. He has lost the goal that he has been persisting in all this time. He will not be able to walk out of his dejection, so he will not come out to stir up trouble again. Yiqing Luo did not reply. Would it not appear again? But, before they were pushed out of that space by the blood-bone barbarian king, the way the barbaric blood-bone king looked at her was obviously not right. Once you've settled the matter of the Linglong Palace Hall, you will have to go to the heaven realm. Even if he appears again, he won't be able to go to the heaven realm to find you. Old man Tsang comforted her. Although he has already awakened, he still can't leave the earth realm. Yiqing Luo took a deep breath. That's true, anyway. We're going to the heaven realm soon. She suppressed the restlessness in her heart. About half an hour later, Dmo Xian's figure appeared in the room. Dressed in a purple robe, he moved like flowing clouds as he walked. When Yiqing Luo's gaze fell onto the man's face, her eyes were filled with a smile. "Ah, Xian." She stretched out her hands towards him. Chapter 4172. Yiqing Luo's arms circled around his neck. Her body was still weak and feeble. "You're back." The young lady was a little flustered and her tone was also soft. Dmo Xian bent down and kissed her forehead. "Miss me?" He carried the young lady and picked up her clothes from the side and helped her put it on. The young lady was too lazy to even lift her hand. Under the man's service, she was dressed neatly. The man took her into his arms again and walked slowly to the outer hall. The air was filled with the rich aroma of food, whetting one's appetite. After waking up from a deep sleep, Yiqing Luo only felt weak all over, but she didn't feel hungry or thirsty. But at this moment, the table was filled with delicious and fragrant dishes. Yiqing Luo's stomach immediately grumbled in response to the scene. She nestled in Dmo Xian's arms, her eyes were curved as she smiled. "You feed me." On her matters. This man had always been very meticulous. Dmo Xian carried her to the dining table and sat down. The young lady's body was still soft, with a soft and boneless feeling. Looking at her posture, Dmo Xian's eyes only flickered slightly. Very quickly, he bent over and carried her in his arms again, then sat down and let the young lady lie in his arms. He took the food by the side and slowly fed it into Yiqing Luo's mouth. Yiqing Luo's expression was very lazy, as she opened her mouth slowly and continued to eat her food. Not knowing if it was an illusion. Yiqing Luo felt a little weak when she was chewing the food. She didn't have the energy to ask Dmo Xian how to deal with the Linglong Palace's matters. While eating, rough footsteps were suddenly heard outside the door. Then, he saw a figure rushing in hastily. "Imperial Madam, I heard you're awake." Old Lai strode in and saw Yiqing Luo, who was like a queen, nestled in the male pet's arms, receiving service. His eyes widened. "Imperial Madam, why do you look so sickly? Is this still the arrogant and mischievous Imperial Madam in my memory?" Yiqing Luo. Was this considered as a compliment? Yiqing Luo swallowed the food in her mouth and rolled her eyes at him. "What are you doing here?" "I heard that the monarch's wife has woken up. Of course, I have to come and have a look," Lao Lai said matter-of-factly. Then, he lowered his voice mysteriously. "But, Madam, you'd better not let others see you like this." "What's wrong with me? She just woke up and didn't have any strength. Was there a need to exaggerate? You haven't seen the bronze mirror, have you?" Old Lai clicked his tongue and said, "The death of the Linglong Palace Lord has caused quite a ruckus. If others see your sickly appearance, they might take the opportunity to attack you." As he spoke, he stroked his white beard. "Some people will do anything to achieve their goals. It looks like you won't be able to be naughty in the near future. Why do you sound so disappointed?" If she couldn't be mischievous, he wouldn't be able to do anything, right? Illusion, it's definitely an illusion. Lao Lai changed the topic as if he was trying to cover something up. "How on earth did you torture yourself like this? If it wasn't for the fact that you were captured by the Linglong Palace Lord and carried back by the Overlord, I would have thought that you had been living a shameless life with the Overlord for a few days." Old Lai. An icy cold and hoarse voice spat out 2 words. His voice was obviously very soft. Chapter 4173. His back straightened up. His face was frivolous, teasing and joking expression had turned serious. "Cough, I suddenly remembered that I still have something on." Old Lai turned his head and left. "Stop." Yiqing Luo suddenly spoke out. Old Lai's feet stopped abruptly. When he felt 2 different gazes land on him, his body froze. "What do you mean by that?" Yiqing Luo straightened her back from Dmo Xian's arms. Although her body was weak, her brows were filled with a weak expression. But when he asked this question, his expression changed. Unknowingly, the overflowing aura was still able to shock people. At least, Old Lai was shocked. "Don't listen to his nonsense, be good, eat something and fill your stomach first." Dmo Xian held Yiqing Luo's waist and pressed her back into his arms. Yiqing Luo's pink lips pursed slightly as her expression turned solemn. She raised her hand and blocked Dmo Xian's arm. Her hands were weak. But when she blocked Dmo Xian's arm, Dmo Xian held back his strength to avoid hurting her. "Old Lai, bring the bronze mirror over," Yiqing Luo said. Old Lai's body stiffened as he looked at Dmo Xian for help. Dmo Xian didn't give a response. He didn't dare to move. Yiqing Luo's slender brows rose slightly as there was an obvious chill in her eyes. Old Lai. Old Lai almost wanted to cry but had no tears. Why was he so cheap that he couldn't wait to rush over after knowing that Yiqing Luo had woken up? On one side was the overlord, who obviously didn't want Madame D to know his current state. On the other side was Madame D, who could make the overlord obedient. So, who did he listen to? No matter who he listened to, it was all wrong. In the end, Old Lai still put on a bitter face as he stared at the overlord's frozen gaze. Step by step, he moved over to get the bronze mirror. Compared to the overlord, Madame D was more terrifying. At least Madame D could control the overlord. But the overlord was obedient to Madame D. No matter how he looked at it, following Madame D's words was the right choice. Old Lai raised the bronze mirror in front of Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo's expression was solemn as her gaze fell onto the bronze mirror. On seeing that blurry face in the bronze mirror, Yiqing Luo was completely stunned. In the bronze mirror, the girl's face was pale and lifeless, as if she had lost all of her vitality. It was as if she was terminally ill. It was as if he would die in the next instant. No matter how she blinked her charming eyes, there wasn't much life in his eyes. What was going on? Yiqing Luo's hands touched her own face. Ever since she woke up, Old Man Song had never mentioned her condition. When Dmo Xian saw her, his expression remained the same. Yiqing Luo's eyes suddenly congealed as she raised her head and looked into Dmo Xian's eyes. You know what's going on with me, right? I'm fine. Dmo Xian held her little hands tightly, using his own warmth to infect her slightly icy cold hands. Rest for a few days and you'll be fine very soon. Did something happen when the blood-bone barbaric king forcibly took over my body? Yiqing Luo thought of herself. When her body was forcibly taken over, she had a moment of blankness. Although it was only for that moment. When she regained her senses, the blood-bone barbaric king had left her body. Whereas she felt weak and powerless. It seemed like it started from that moment. Chapter 4174. Dmo Xian turned silent. Yiqing Luo held his hand tightly. Ah Xian. Cough. There are still many things in Linglong Palace that I need to settle. I'll make a move first. Old Lai saw that the situation was not right and hurriedly moved towards the main door. As he moved, he stared at the two of them who were looking at each other silently. Seeing that the two of them ignored him, Old Lai swiftly turned around and ran away. The door closed. The lights in the room dimmed. In the quiet room, only the sound of their breathing could be heard. Yiqing Luo pursed her pink lips as she stared at the man's eyes without blinking. Ah Xian, tell me, what's wrong with my body? Dmo Xian's obsidian-like eyes were overflowing with peach blossoms, like a pool of spring water. His expression was very grave. The two of them looked at each other for a long time. His slender and beautiful hand slowly held the young lady's little hand. Slender as jade fingers, the joints were exquisite, suffused with a faint glow of beautiful jade. Yiqing Luo's gaze shifted to his fingers, as she was dazzled momentarily. Broad and thick, holding the tender little hand. Slowly placed it by the side of his lips, falling a kiss. The man's thin lips were boiling hot, imprinting Yiqing Luo's hand, as it became scorching hot. Lil Luo, don't worry. I won't let anything happen to you. His magnetic voice was slightly hoarse, with some unconcealable helplessness. Yiqing Luo's body slightly stiffened. Long curly eyelashes blinked a few times. Suddenly, as though she realized something, her eyes looked at Dmo Xian in a daze. She looked at that handsome face, which was filled with heartache and worry. Her heart thumped hard. Yiqing Luo withdrew her hand from Dmo Xian's hand. Her hands clenched tightly as she closed her eyes slightly, circulating the profound jade heart in her body. But it was completely empty. There was nothing there. The emptiness in her body was like a floating boat, wandering aimlessly on the vast sea. Once those tyrannical powers, when released, could collapse Mount Tai, destroy the four seas. Nothing. Nothing at all. Her entire body was so weak that she couldn't even do normal actions. Now, even her own powers had completely disappeared. Yiqing Luo's heart instantly sank. His pale face turned even paler. Little Luo, Dmo Xian's warm embrace embraced the young lady tightly, suppressing the young lady's attempt to circulate her profound energy. This is only temporary. It won't affect your body, you'll be fine after a few days. How many days? Yiqing Luo felt that her lips were very dry and the words that came out of her mouth were somewhat astringent. Very soon. Dmo Xian hugged her tightly. I won't let anything happen to you. He did not give an exact time. This meant that Dmo Xian had not thought of a way to recover her. Yiqing Luo buried her head in the man's arms. She deeply inhaled the man's sandalwood scent. However, his heart could not calm down at all. She would become like this. It must be the after-effects of the blood-bone barbarian king forcefully occupying her body. Little Luo, the man's worried voice came from above. He put his hands on her shoulders, trying to pull her away from his embrace and look at her. Yiqing Luo rubbed her head against his chest, as her arms wrapped tightly around his waist, unwilling to raise her head. This is only temporary, believe me. Dmo Xian didn't force her, as he hugged her tightly again, as his chin rested on the top of her head. He didn't want everyone to worry about him. She didn't want to show off that she cared a lot about losing her power. The matter of the Linglong Palace was very complicated. After all, it could be considered the faith of the land. It was enough to make Dmo Xian badly battered. She did not want to be a burden to Dmo Xian. Yiqing Luo, come out. Suddenly, an angry roar filled with resentment came from the door. Then came the footsteps of someone trying to force their way over. But she was blocked by Langley Xian's raised hand. Without Lord Dizun's orders, no one is allowed to disturb Lady Matriarch. Chapter 4176. Please return. Langley Xian's expression did not change. He had the appearance of an old cadre. If I don't see her today, I will absolutely not leave. That person gnashed her teeth in anger. This saintess must demand an explanation for the Linglong Palace master. Wu Fu, if you don't stop, don't blame me for taking action. Tang Beiyuan said impatiently. A woman who has to rely on the overlord to resolve everything. Only you people would treat her as the mistress of the imperial palace. Wu Fu, laughed coldly. Come. Do you really think this saintess is afraid of you? As she spoke, Wu Fu, Xian energy burst forth from her body and she got into an attacking stance. Tang Beiyuan's expression was cold. She raised her hand and was about to attack. Suddenly, a young girl's clear and serene voice rang out from the room. Beiyuan, let her in. Qing Luo. Tang Beiyuan's hands paused as her expression changed drastically. For the past few days, she had been guarding outside the door. Naturally, he knew about Yiqing Luo's current condition. If Yiqing Luo saw Wu Fuer, and Wu Fuer suddenly attacked Yiqing Luo, what should she do? The risk was too great. It doesn't matter. Doesn't she want an explanation? I'll have a good talk with her. Yiqing Luo's tone was indifferent. Ha! A glint flashed across Wu Fuer's eyes. She retracted her attacking stance and raised her head arrogantly. Did you hear that? It's your master who wants to see me. Don't block the way. Tang Beiyuan's face was livid and she refused to budge. Wu Fu straightened her back and strode towards the door. When he approached Tang Beiyuan, he even puffed out his chest and bumped into her. Tang Beiyuan's eyes burned with anger. She clenched her fist and was about to punch. Beside her, Langley Xian held her hand and shook his head slightly at her. Wu Fu swaggered into the room with her head held high. Only then did Langley Xian let go of Tang Beiyuan and said in a low voice, "Go find Di Zun." Tang Beiyuan pursed her lips and stared at the closed door for a moment. She gritted her teeth and said, "Pay attention to what's going on inside. I'll go look for His Majesty right away." Inside the house, Wu Fu stepped into the room. That arrogance of hers had mysteriously dissipated. She did not know why, but her heart inexplicably began to beat uneasily. His originally arrogant face also became nervous, and his heart trembled. It was as if the air was filled with a kind of pressurizing aura. It made her a little breathless. Wu Fu didn't want to admit it. But he had to admit it. This was emanating from his bones, the fear towards Yi Qing Luo. Following the sound, she slowly walked into the inner hall. The room was decorated very elegantly. The scent of sandalwood in the air was soothing, but it made her heart tighten even more. It was as if he was looking at His Majesty right in front of him. The light in the room was dim and hazy. Her gaze slowly fell on the bed, the young girl who was leaning against the headboard. The luxurious and exquisite undergarments wrapped around the girl's beautiful figure. She just leaned against the wall. The lines of her figure were soft and smooth. The girl's black hair cascaded down like a waterfall, silky and thick. Between her brows was a lazy and cold gaze. Her half-squinted charming eyes were suffused with a faint cold glint. That pink lip slightly curled up into a smile. Although it looked delicate and charming, it inexplicably made one's scalp go numb and a chill run down their spine. Just a glance, you're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.